Okay, let's get started, please. Mr. Ching.
Good morning, Dr. Sanders.
Good morning.
With the last cross-examiner, there was a slight discussion about NSF and NSF funds, and I believe you testified that there were no funds coming and that there may not be any funds coming in the future. Is that correct?
I testified that NSF has stated that it has made no commitment to provide funds in the future.
In this no commitment situation, is there a time constraint that's involved in that statement? Like, is it possible that this statement was made in reference to the 2011 decadal situation?
I take it as a statement that no commitment has been made, period. No commitment.
Haven't there been any discussions that there's a possibility of applying in the next decadal, which comes in 2021?
We've had no discussions with the NSF about us applying.
Has the NSF made any statements regarding your possible applying at that time?
No.
Do you know that there are discussions in Congress about possibly funding your project?
I'm not aware of any such discussions.
Okay. Can you put up C23 again? The title of C23 that's being shown on the screen says TMT's relative size is small given its mirror size. Is that correct? TMT's relative size is small given its mirror size. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is there anything on this piece of paper or figure that says anything about mirror size?
The mirror sizes aren't listed, but I testified that Subaru and Gemini are 8 meters, we're 30 meters, Giant Magellan Telescope
I understand, but that wasn't my
24.5.
question.
Okay.
My question was, is there anything about mirror size in this figure?
The mirror sizes are not called out in the figure.
I see. So other than looking at the bottom line that talks about relative strengths versus the Hubble telescope, there is no way of knowing what the relative sizes of these telescope collectors are. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Earlier, there were some questions about oil drips. Earlier on, there were questions and discussions about oil drips. You testified that there were either pans or something that were put under these vehicles at night to catch these drips, and that some of these drips might have been water condensation. Do you know whether these vehicles drip during the daytime?
They can drip at any time. Whenever they're parked, they should have protection.
Could they also drip while they're in operation?
Yes.
So are there any things done to catch these drips in the daytime, whether they're under operation or not?
I don't know.
Okay, and speaking about mirror coatings, I believe you testified that it was, silver was being used as the primary reflector on these segments. And I believe you said that the effluent from the washing was not hazardous. Is that what you said?
It's my understanding that they're not classified as hazardous waste,
I see.
but we are not paying attention to that. We are treating all of it as if it were hazardous waste and handling it as if it was hazardous waste and disposing it as if it was hazardous waste.
Great. So you wouldn't want to drink it either?
You don't have to be hazardous waste to be undrinkable.
Some people drink
Yeah.
pretty bad water. Okay, very good. On page 4 of your written direct testimony at B, TMT Observatory Design, you say, the TMT Observatory design is being and will continue to be developed in consultation with the Office of Mauna Kea Management, OMKM, through their design review process. Is that correct?
Correct.
When did the TMT Observatory design begin to be developed?
Oh, the very earliest concept designs, the project really started in April of 2004 when I came as the project manager. There were some earlier projects, and then the design began in early conceptual phase then, and has been developed ever since.
So the TMT Observatory design is continuing to be developed even as we speak. Is that correct?
Yes, but only in details. All the major design choices are now fixed.
Will there ever be a time when the TMT Observatory design stop being developed?
When you commit to actually fabricating things, that's when the design has to stop.
So between 2010, when the CDUA was signed, and the present, which is 2017, as we all know, what are some of the significant developments that have come out of the ongoing process?
You mean in the design?
Yes, this continuing design
Yeah.
activity.
Mostly details that are not obvious and visible to the design. The basic shapes and sizes and dimensions have not changed.
But these developments will eventually, hopefully, show up in the physical observatory. Is that correct?
Correct.
So in this contested case process, would it be interesting and important for some of these details to be as part of the record?
I don't believe any of the design details that have been developed go to the impacts of the observatory. They are small adjustments, details of mirror designs, controls, and so on, mostly internal.
So we're talking about 7 years of development that only goes to fine-tuning the thing.
But very important fine-tuning.
Yes. Do you know of any mechanism that would allow these developments to become part of this contested case hearing process?
Objection, Your Honor, vague and ambiguous.
Mr. Ching, could you clarify, please? I wasn't sure about the question either.
That's okay, I'll move on. Continuing on page 4, on line 5 you say, the design details provided here represent the current design. Is that correct?
And where is that?
On line 5 of that same paragraph on page 4. I believe it's line 5 at the top of the page. The design details provided here represent the current design.
This is the paragraph that begins, the TMT observatory design is being and will continue to be developed. Is that the paragraph?
I believe so. I don't have a copy of your WDT with me. So on the 5th line, is that what's on the 5th line there?
Yeah, that paragraph is correct, and I stand by what it says, yes.
What do you mean when you say the design details provided here represent the current design? It's possible that you might have answered this before, but I thought I would try to get the actual facts out more clearly.
I think I answered it before.
Okay. Okay, on the same page, in the last paragraph, you begin saying, the TMT adaptive optics AO system, you say the TMT observatory will be the first optical infrared observatory of its size to integrate AO into its original design. Is that correct?
Correct.
Are you saying that the Giant Magellan and the EELT don't use AO in their designs?
I can't speak to how they're integrating it into the design. I believe they are. I believe we may have been doing it first, but that's a detail. So your question is well-founded.
In fact, we may not know, what the details of their developments are.
Today, I don't.
And then when you say of its size, do you mean like specifically 30 meters, or are you talking about these large segmented telescopes?
I'm talking about large telescopes in general.
Not necessarily one just of 30 meters.
Not just 30 meters.
It could be the 39 meters of the ELT or the smaller Magellan.
Right.
On page 5, that's paragraph number 4, you say the Kawat dome base, cap, and shutter structures will appear rounded and smooth and have a reflective aluminum-like exterior coating. Is that correct?
Correct.
What do you mean when you say a reflective aluminum-like exterior coating?
The dome will be made of steel, plain common steel. It will be painted with a reflective paint that will have a metallic component in the paint to make the paint reflective, and it will look something like an aluminized surface.
Okay, so it won't really have an aluminum skin.
No.
And what kind of appearance will this thing look like? In other words, would it be a shiny kind of glossy kind of finish? Would it be a buffed, dull kind of surface? What? Or have you decided?
We haven't decided. Your question is well-founded. So if you look at Exhibit C3, you see a general representation. It's not highly polished like a mirror, a
Yes.
real mirror, and it's not very dull.
Although you say somewhere, I believe, that it'll reflect something about the sky, either the colors of the sky or the colors of the ground or something like that.
Right. It will be reflective enough so that it will reflect the colors of the sky, but it won't be so highly polished and reflective that it's like a mirror. And
I
the
see.
exact level of reflectivity or specularity will be decided when we choose the paint with the contractor.
I see. So you didn't happen to bring a sample of this, or possibilities of what this outside surface might look like?
No.
With you. On the bottom of page 7, you say, finally, some site preparation for the TMT groundbreaking was done in 2015, also within the TMT site boundaries. Now, I believe that early on you testified that a grading permit had been obtained by the contractor to do this work. Is that correct?
For the groundbreaking?
Yes.
Yes.
And the access way, I believe. You testified.
I believe that grading permit was for the entire civil package that included the groundbreaking and all of the work in the civil package, including the
I see.
access way and the rough grading of the site. It's a single grading permit.
So my question to you is was the groundbreaking pad ever a part of the design, the overall detailed design for the TMT observatory?
Well, it's included in the drawing package that was submitted to the DLNR describing it, but you could say that that pad is an intermediate state in the grading. As you grade the site, you might stop with a graded pad. You might use it for a certain purpose and then go on grading.
I see. But then, in order to build that pad, you had to have some kind of special permission of DLNR or BLNR. Is that correct?
It was part of the civil package approval.
But in order to begin construction of any kind, you would have to have a special permission or consent of DLNR, BLNR. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, after you get a permit, after you get a sublease, before you start building, you would need another approval, wouldn't you, to begin construction? And that's the one that says that you have to begin construction within 2 years, and then it's got to be finished in 12 years and all of that?
And that work was done within that framework. I'm not sure the exact details on that day.
But my question really is, did that consent to do the groundbreaking pad, was that something that was in this package, or was it specially done?
It was included in the civil package.
I see.
It was called out as a step in the civil package.
Okay,
So there was a sheet that showed it.
I see. So you're testifying that DLNR did consent to doing this work as a matter of a packaged deal.
I believe that's correct.
At the top of page 8, second to the last line of the top paragraph, you say, some work was done on the access way to facilitate the geotechnical studies in TMT groundbreaking. Is that correct?
Which paragraph are you talking about? Is this
It's on
C?
page 8,
Page
the
8.
top paragraph, second to the last line.
Some work.
It's the last line.
Yeah. Right. So, yes, the sentence is correct, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, There were two possible routes that have been under consideration for quite a while. Is that correct?
You're talking about the access way.
Yes.
There were two or three, yes.
And they were pending. In other words, there was no last or final decision made on them. Has there now been a final decision made on them? On which one that you would prefer to use?
Yes, there was a final decision. There was one in place when this work, the geotechnical studies and the TMT groundbreaking, were carried out. What you're referring to is early on, there were several alternate proposals for the accessway.
Yes.
Some went across some of the existing roads system at the SMA site and continued on the pre-existing Jeep trail that was built in the 1960s that was used for site testing. One of those routes crossed the, instead of crossing the SMA roads, went on the Jeep trail that was constructed on the cinder cone, on the Pu'u, for about 750 feet, and then rejoined the road system at SMA and then continued on the old 1960s era Jeep trail out to 13 North. So there were three or four. In the final environmental impact statement, there were a number laid out. We made the choice of the route, which is your question,
Yes.
after consultation, as part of the OMKM design review process. Part of that
In
design,
any event,
Yeah.
the decision has been made. You have made
Correct.
your choice.
yeah,
And that choice was which one?
the one that goes on the Pu'u for 750 feet,
I see, okay.
and then continues on the other roads.
Thank you. On page 10, at the first bullet point, you say, port staging area. An existing warehouse and/or yard near the port where the TMT project components are received. This area will be used for receiving materials and assembly of those materials to the extent possible prior to transport to either another staging area or the construction site. Is that correct?
Correct.
And I believe some questions were asked about that already, in that there would be some person or somebody that will function to make sure that there are no, well, first of all, you have rules about what people can put or how they can send stuff to you. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then you probably have a backup system that says that somebody inspects the stuff when it shows up. Is that
Correct.
correct? My question to you is, what happens to all of this, all the packing materials that may or may not be contaminated when they arrive? What do you do with that?
It has to be disposed of properly, following the laws.
Okay. On page 11, first paragraph, second sentence, you say, it would take approximately 7 years to complete. Is that correct?
Correct. And this is under the construction
Yes, I believe.
section? Yes, correct.
I don't know if you know it or not, but a lot of witnesses have testified that it would take 10 years to complete. Now, why would you, are there any good reasons why you would decide that 7 years is the time that we would take to complete the project?
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the testimony of prior witnesses. No one has testified it would take 10 years.
Mr. Ching, maybe you can remind me of where you got that from?
Well, I can withdraw the 10 years, but I would like to ask him why he believes that 7 years would be the time to do the building.
Okay.
The statement is it would take approximately 7 years to complete. That's accurate, including the word approximately. And the exact length of time includes things like weather delays, includes things like whether things are ready from suppliers, and funding paces. So, but I stand by that statement.
I see. And the beginning of that 7-year period would be what event?
In this paragraph, what we're talking about is the initiation of the construction at the site, starting from that date and moving forward.
So at the beginning, well, that would probably begin at where you start leveling the site.
Right.
Would that be correct? On page 11, in the last complete paragraph, the first sentence, you say, the TMT observatory and the extent of the access way exclusively used to access the TMT observatory will be dismantled and the site restored at the end of the TMT observatory's life in compliance with the decommissioning plan for the Mauna Kea observatories, a subplan of the Mauna Kea Comprehensive Management Plan, in parentheses, the commissioning plan, and then OMKM 2010A, is that correct?
Correct.
Do you know that the decommissioning subplan says decommissioning is initiated when a sublessee decides to cease operation due to changing priorities, lack of funding, or obsolescence, when the sublease expires, or if UH revokes a sublease? Do you know that?
I didn't know that till you read it.
I see. But that, if I'm correct in what I read, then what you said in your statement doesn't seem to be totally correct. Can you clarify why that may be so?
What I said in my statement is the statement of a project manager who's responsible to deliver an observatory with a lifetime of 50 years. So
I
my
see.
perspective is at the end of the 50 years, it would be dismantled. What
So,
the
so
owner-
you didn't
what-
really consult the rules when you came to that position?
This is my statement as
Yes.
project manager.
Thank you. On page 12, the second paragraph, paragraph from the bottom, you say, site restoration activities may involve using stockpiled material or materials similar to the surroundings either to fill holes or to reconstruct topography. Consideration will be given to where fill materials will come from, how excavation and removal of materials will impact the collection area and any habitat surrounding the restoration area, and what the cultural considerations are for bringing materials from a different place to Mauna Kea. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you know where all the materials will go to from your leveling and other activities on the site? In other words, I'm not. You were asked early on about what the volume was, I believe, of some of these materials, and so do you know where these materials will be going and what will happen to them in the meantime?
Yes. The plan is not to bring any material from the mountain off the mountain. The plan is to bring as little material onto the mountain from elsewhere, and I'll say what I mean by that. The plan is to use all excavated material from the grading and from the excavations for the foundations on the site to create the level that we want. Some places are cut, some places are filled with that material to create a level site, but it's all local material. Some of that material will be used to create the appropriate surface and grade on the access way, all again, local material. The idea is to not bring any material off-site or to bring any material on-site. We expect a small amount of material will be excess, and we expect to stockpile that material for future use in restoration on Mauna Kea. We expect to stockpile it at the batch plant and to place it at the batch plant when we're finished with the batch plant use in a way where the batch plant site will be as natural as possible. And so when TMT were to be decommissioned later, if material were to be moved back to the site to restore the topography, it would come from that stockpiled material.
I see.
The only material we plan to bring from off the mountain are the necessary materials for paving. And
see.
those materials would be removed when TMT is deconstructed and removed from Mauna Kea.
Yes. I believe that with the batch plant, that a statement has been made that materials will be put there and a kind of restoration will take place in the meantime. Is that correct?
I think that's what I meant when I said that they'll be put there at the batch plant in a
Yes.
way that the batch plant, after we use it, looks natural.
Okay. So my question is, upon decommissioning, when you're going to try to, and there are a number of options, restore area E, and you take some of the material back off the batch plant. Now, this restoration that will be taking place in the meantime will probably be lost at that time, wouldn't it?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the last question. The restoration that will be taking place in the meantime.
I forget.
I think you said will be lost during that period.
You know, yes, the restoration efforts that will be benefiting that site at present, like when you do the leveling and all of that, at the time of decommissioning, and you take back those materials, won't that leave the batch plant site in some kind of not restored condition?
So I would assume that when that time comes, and as we've already discussed, the details of how the restoration will be done will be decided at that time.
I see.
Part of it will be just what you're asking about, which is in what restored state to leave the batch plant site. That would be part of it.
Yeah. And it'll be solved, I suppose, by those persons in the future at the proper time.
Correct.
Some of the fill or some of the stuff that comes off the site will be used around the site to smooth out the edges. Is that correct?
Correct. The civil design, as I said, the excavated material and the cut material will be used to fill the site and create the topography that's needed, and that includes what you just asked about.
Okay.
Right.
So at the time of decommissioning, when you're trying to restore Area E, will some of that material be then pirated back to be used for the work to return the place to what it looks like now?
I presume so, and that's part of the details that have to be worked out in the future.
But then if there's a shortage, then you're talking about the possibility of materials also coming to the site from off of Mauna Kea.
I don't think if there's a resort to any other materials, and you know, we are trying to maintain soil balance and an inventory of the stockpile, it would be a small amount and it presumably would be local material. But that's a matter for planning in the future.
And when you say local, you mean Mauna Kea?
I mean on Mauna Kea, yes.
Now you go to some length talking about mitigation, is that correct?
Yes, what pages are you talking about?
Nothing specifically.
Okay.
What is your definition of mitigation?
Something you do to compensate for an impact?
I see. Okay, we're going to switch over to something else now. Can you put back on the screen C3?
C3. This one?
Yes.
Okay.
I think I'm quite sure you mentioned that on the left figure, the picture of the TMT observatory, that normally the dome would have been using the same focal lengths as other telescopes, that the dome would be very large, like as depicted by your dotted lines, and that because you did an F1 design, that the dome could be a lot smaller, and that making it smaller would be part of your mitigation efforts. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, with the smaller dome, would there be less wind resistance?
If you make a big, the answer is yes. Smaller domes, less wind resistance.
Would snow removal be easier?
That depends on the design. You could have a small dome
I
in
see.
which snow removal is difficult, and you can have a small dome in which it's easier.
Okay. So then, would the mechanical systems in this type of dome be simpler than other kinds?
No, the horizontal axis where the dome rotates this way is similar to other domes, but you see that there's an inclined ring girder,
Yes.
and that's much more complicated than has been used in other telescope domes because that ring has to be in the same plane, it has to be rigid, it has to be supported by the bottom part. So that's an
If not,
engineering, it's an engineering challenge.
right. If not, the thing wouldn't fit together, would it?
Correct. So this is
Yes.
a risky design.
I see, but it's a risk that you have
We've taken and we're going to make it
taken.
work.
Yes. And then the smaller design would also mean that it would use less materials,
It will use less materials than a bigger one, yes.
and it may use materials that are not as heavy duty.
That's not true. We're using the same kinds of structural materials.
I see, but not as much of.
Correct.
And that, in fact, you would use less paint, and I believe the idea of using less energy might also come into play.
Correct.
And I believe that your foundation could also be not as heavy duty. Is that correct?
Because the mass is less.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay, switching over to the other side of the page, looking at the bottom figure. Is that Haleakala in the background?
I don't know.
There seems to be a mountain there? Or a something, a landform?
Maybe. I don't know.
Are there other observatories in the picture?
I don't see any, but I don't know what all the little bumps are.
Okay, so whatever that blob of matter, whatever on the horizon there is, there is no doubt for me, I don't know about you, but all of these effects or singular effects are within the frame of this picture. Is that correct?
I don't understand the question.
The composition of this picture includes a simulated TMT observatory with a mass in the back. It's all a part of this composition. Is that correct? Might be a simple question or answer, but
I don't know if the thing in the back is a mass or whether it's the shape of the clouds in that picture. I just don't know.
whatever. That's what I said. Whatever it is, it
Right.
could be clouds, it could be mass. Thank you. Okay, switching back up to the top of that, the upper right-hand corner of this C3. You testified that the dome was designed to be very tight and to only allow a 20-inch clearance. Is that correct?
Correct.
And I believe you mentioned that it would make maintaining whatever there that needs maintaining more difficult. Is that correct?
Correct.
I'm not sure what you see, but I see a lot of space there with a structure in the middle, but still a lot of space. That the only impact that the 20-inch space would have would be on the tip of that vertical part, if that vertical part would move over to the left side of the picture. Other than that configuration, it looks like the 20-inch space doesn't really matter that much. What do you think?
That's a good question. That illustration only shows the upper end of the telescope, but at the middle of the telescope, which is where the blue text box is, there are the Naismith platforms with all the instruments and all of the other hardware, and they also come out to within 20 inches. And there's a lot more parts of the observatory.
That may be correct, but that's not what I asked you.
Yeah. Excuse me? It's
That may be correct, but that's not what I asked you.
okay.
Okay, so up at the top of the structure, that internal structure there, I imagine that that's where the secondary mirror goes.
Correct.
So what is that part that sticks up above that frame, or what looks like a frame?
The laser launch telescope for the guide star lasers.
I see. And so when that whole mechanism moves over to the left, it clears that little sort of boxy thing by 20 inches. Is that correct?
At that point, yes.
What is that boxy thing?
The little box below the letter T in telescope?
No, where the 20-inch space is pointed,
Oh,
and there's the 20-inch dimension
right.
goes from where the end of the frame would have been to the little boxy thing. What is that boxy thing?
Right, that's the service walkway and mechanisms, service walkway for the shutter and the mechanisms for the flaps
I see.
and the shutter.
So that the distance, that 20-inch space, was a designed detail that could have been 10 inches or it could have been 30 inches. Is that correct?
It could have been 30. It wouldn't be practical to make it 10.
I see. Well,
That's
assuming that we're doing a high-tech project, that 10 inches would give you would have been sufficient to do all kinds of things. Anyway, whatever. I will avoid the objection, but go ahead. Okay, so at the top of that picture, you say pivot off telescope. Is that correct?
Yes, those words are intended to describe the 20-inch thick shell-like region which the telescope doesn't enter as it pivots.
I see, but the pivoting point is not there.
As I said, as the telescope pivots, that's that line that's 20 inches away from the inside of the enclosure is the extreme edge of the pivot.
I understand.
That's a different use of the word pivot than what you're referring to.
I see.
Right.
And so, okay, so how were you involved in the production of this drawing, this upper right-hand
No,
drawing?
I did not make that drawing.
But you had something to do with the 20-inch space.
I'm the one who decided it would be the 20-inch space, yes.
I see, and that the 20-inch space would extend from the box to where this, the point of the structure would subtend.
Wherever the telescope points,
Yes.
it can never be closer than 20 inches to the dome.
So this picture is a true representation of your design.
It's a conceptual representation, yes.
Now, early on, you testified that you read the EIS, but a while back. So you are familiar, at least somewhat, with the EIS. Is that correct?
Generally familiar.
I have an exhibit here that is part of the final EIS, and it's A-03, and it's page 3-102.
Thank you.
Now, at the top of this page, there is a drawing quite similar to the drawing of yours or in your exhibit that was marked C3. You see that?
Yes, I do.
Now, can you lower it a little bit so we can see the top of the dome there? Okay, this drawing also mentions a 20-inch space, doesn't it?
Correct.
But this 20-inch space is not the same as in your drawing. Is that correct?
I don't see that it's different. I'm not sure why.
Well, it's
think
drawn from the surface that you talked about, the imaginary surface that is subtended by the end of the laser thingy and the dome, where yours was between that and the square thingy. Is that, do you see the difference there?
In fact, the drawing that you just put up from the EIS is not a good representation of that 20-inch separation. The 20-inch separation is the minimum separation between any part of the dome and any part of the telescope. And the 20-inch that's shown here is in one place, but there's actually a structure on the dome that comes in closer. So you're correct. This drawing is not the same as mine. And it's
This
also-
drawing is defective.
It's
It's different than yours and it's not
different
correct.
than mine, correct.
Your Honor, I'd like to move that this drawing, figure 3 dash, whatever it is,
25.
25, be stricken.
Be stricken from the EIS?
From the EIS.
Mr. Ng?
Your Honor, it's not in evidence yet,
He
number
ju-
one. Number two, it just goes to weight.
Goes to
And the witnesses testified as to what the correct concept should have been in that particular design.
Your Honor, he just testified that it's the defective drawing. Why should we have a defective drawing in such an important thing as the EIS?
It goes to weight. I'm going to overrule the objection.
This is a similar drawing out of Dr. Hayes' written direct testimony. And my question to you is, have you seen this page in Dr. Hayes' testimony before?
I have not read Dr. Hayes' testimony.
My final question is, if there are other drawings that are similar to the one that we just talked about, that was in the EIS, should they also either be stricken or that they not be given the weight or any kind of weight in the determination of this contested case hearing?
Objection, Your Honor, you're asking him to make a ruling on evidence, so it's inappropriate.
You're
Thank you,
invading.
Your Honor. I'm through.
Okay, we'll take a noon recess, please, till 1 o'clock.
You're watching Naleo TV.
Contested case hearing for the 30-meter telescope project, a proceeding for the State of Hawaii, DLNR, Board of Land and Natural Resources.